We all know in construction that cash flow and cash is king. Well, if cash is king, then the flow of that cash in and out of your projects and in and out of your business are the lifeblood of the success or failure of any different business, but especially construction, and even more so on a construction project by project. So of course, someone might be sitting there saying, well, duh, Scott, what else am I going to use? I got to put my money in the bank. Certainly you're not suggesting putting it in a shoebox or spending with cash. Of course, no, I'm not. What do I mean by using your bank account to determine how much cash you have by looking in that bank account every single morning, every single day, figuring out how much money you have? That's just a critical error of managing cash. Well, for me, it means not planning it out. Most often, not managing your cash flow isn't, I have all this cash flow worked out perfectly, I can see it, I live off this awesome report, it's updated daily, given to me every morning, and then I just make terrible decisions off it. That's not what happens. What happens is there isn't a daily cash flow report. Sometimes there isn't any report. We like to call it underwriting to perfection. What does underwriting to perfection mean? It means that, yeah, the cash flow works. If every single thing went exactly perfect in a perfect scenario, meaning you make the cash flow work, not estimate what actually might happen, timelines that might happen, and see what the cash flow tells you. It's not important to make a pretty spreadsheet. What's important is to put reality down and see what the spreadsheet will tell you. And that's what a cash flow analysis does. Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Construction MF'ers. I'm Scott Peper, CEO and founder of Mobilization Funding, and today we are going to talk about critical cash flow and the steps that are required to make sure you do not fall victim to the cash flow mistakes that can bring a business down. So why are we shooting this video? Well, look, we all know in construction that cash flow and cash is king. Well, if cash is king, then the flow of that cash in and out of your projects and in and out of your business are the lifeblood of the success or failure of any different business, but especially construction, and even more so on a construction project by project. Meaning, if you're looking at it project by project on your cash flow, it could be even more critical than even in your business, because every single project can flow a little bit differently depending on how your expenses are spent. Are you using contract labor, direct labor, buying materials, owner direct materials? And of course, how is your customer paying you? Are they paying you in 30 days or 60? Do they say they're 30 and you plan for that, but it's actually closer to 75 or 80? There's just a lot going on. And it's so critical to understand not only the cash flow in reality of how you're managing it before the job starts, but also during. And of course, before the job starts, it's even more important to stress test that cash flow to find out, hey, if I'm expecting to be paid in 30 days and I'm not paid for 60, what's going to happen to me? Because if you don't know that going into it, if you find that out when you're actually living it, and it actually turns out to be a complete disaster for not only the project, but your business, you're going to really want to know or wish you knew that way in advance. It'll help you be planning for decisions. It'll help you plan for what type of terms and conditions you need to have in your contract or you request to have. And candidly, it might even keep you from doing the job, because some risks just aren't worth taking. That is what we're going to go through here on this video. Why are cash flow and the criticality of the cash flow specifically so important to a project, and of course as you roll them up into the business. In order to figure out what to do, let's talk about the 3 most common mistakes that we see made. Again, and why are we even having this video? Well, at Mobilization Funding for the last 11 years, we have analyzed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different cash flows for all different types of businesses and all different types of projects. Not just for our clients, but a lot of the folks that come to us looking to see if they should do a project, looking to see if they should actually try to get a loan for a project. If not from us, from who? We analyze so many different cash flows on a weekly basis that we have built a muscle, a knowledge, an experience, a database of information. Not only do we use that information to help us make loans with customers of ours or potential clients of ours, But we also use that information to share the education and the information learned from you. Some of the best lessons that I share here in these type of videos or with our customers are from the lessons of customers that came to us or people that came to us. They wanted to be a customer. They wanted to take out a loan. We analyzed it for them, showed them why it won't work, why we can't help them, but also why they shouldn't do it. And you know what? They made a great educated decision when had the information in front of them to not do it. Well, what did we learn there? We learned a ton. We learned way more from the things that we don't do in the analysis, and of course, than what we would learn if we had to go through all the failure and pain. Now, when you do go through the failure and pain and you get to the other side, you also can learn a lot, but you have to go through all that first. It's a lot better to actually look at what it would be proactively, see it, know what that's going to feel like if it were to happen, and then plan accordingly. And all of that information and all those different hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different projects that we've analyzed from so many different clients, that's what we're going to share here with you now. So what is the number one mistake? It is using your bank statement as a way to manage how much cash you have. So of course, someone might be sitting there saying, well, duh, Scott, what else am I going to use? I got to put my money in the bank. Certainly you're not suggesting putting it in a shoebox or spending with cash. And of course, no, I'm not. What do I mean by using your bank account to determine how much cash you have by looking in that bank account every single morning, every single day, figuring out how much money you have? That's just a critical error of managing cash. Now, why is that? Your cash in your account is how much you have, but there's a big difference between your bank balance and how much your ledger balance is. Now, what is a ledger balance? A ledger balance is how much money you actually have that you can use for certain and specific items. The ledger balance in particular is how much cash do you have on hand against how much cash, maybe it's checks, maybe it's payments that you're about to make or need to make. How much available cash do you have to spend that isn't already planned for? What does that mean? Well, look, if you're getting a $250,000 check from a project and you have $150,000 of materials that must be paid as soon as your check's paid, then really you only have $100,000 for your business. Now, out of that other remaining 100, you have 2 weeks worth of labor that need to be paid the week you're in and the very next week. And each of those laborers, each of your labor payrolls are $25,000 each. Well, now you're down to $50,000. So that $250,000 already has $200,000 accounted for. Let's just say your accounts payable, one of your suppliers, two of your suppliers for other projects, other things are really hammering down on you, and they're going to be tight if you don't make a payment. And let's say that payment is $75,000. Well, when you get that $250,000, it might make you think, oh yeah, you know what? I could just use the $75,000 over there because they're the loudest supplier, and after all, I do need them. You make that $75,000, and you're thinking, okay, I got $175,000 left to work with. Now you pay your $150,000 or you pay your $100,000 material supplier, and all of a sudden now you're going to be tight for payroll. And that right there is exactly where the problems occur. It's making those decisions based on the amount of cash you see versus knowing how much of that cash that you can actually use. That is the difference between your ledger balance and your bank balance. Now, one other thing I want to point out that's a little more specific to construction when it relates to ledgers, balances, bank balances. The biggest thing that's different from other industries is usually a ledger balance might just be, hey, this is how much is in my bank and this is how much I've written checks against it. Okay, cool. But in a construction business, because of the volatility of the money and how much money actually comes into your business that's already really accounted for, it's really critical to know what your cash needs are on a specific basis. And because of the frequency of the amount of cash that's usually paid in a construction business, once a month or it's not like you have credit card receipts every single day. You have to really manage that cash in chunks. It can be a blessing, but it also can be a curse. It can be very difficult to do that when you're getting cash in big chunks, to have to plan and forecast out what cash you need, when you're going to need it, and for what frequency and period of time, especially if you're trying to manage getting paid on the 10th of the month and that gets stretched to the 20th of the month. So now you have two different forces working against you. You have to plan out and forecast, Forecasting, payments can get moved all the time in construction. It's very infrequent that things happen on schedule all the time. I'm sorry, it's very frequent that things can change and not happen right away, on time, every time. So what I want to point out to you all is it is difficult, but it's even more of a reason why managing your cash flow is so critical. And most importantly, why using your cash, your bank balance, cash, is not the best option and one of the biggest mistakes we see often made. Mistake number 2, and we touched on this a little bit in the 1, it's not managing your cash flow. Now, what does that mean? Well, for me, it means not planning it out. Most often, not managing your cash flow isn't, I have all this cash flow worked out perfectly, I can see it, I live off this awesome report, it's updated daily, given to me every morning, and then I just make terrible decisions off it. That's not what happens. What happens is there isn't a daily cash flow report. Sometimes there isn't any report. And really what's happening is you see the cash in your business, you have to access in your brain what actually needs to be paid. Usually that might be determined by how much of a pain in the butt is something being, how loud is a supplier being, who called me last, who's putting the most pressure under me, and then you start making decisions based off of those types of variables. And that is not the way to make those decisions. Now, when you get into those situations, it's usually also because of a lack of cash flow reporting. When you know what your cash flow is going to be and you've managed and forecasted out and you have it down to the variables that you can manage best, when is a certain payment going to come? Who do I need to pay and when? What are my costs going to be planned out per project over a certain sequence of days, weeks, and months? When you know all those things, you can then proactively communicate to people before they become the loud noise, before they become the person that's calling you, before they become the person who's just screaming and yelling or the biggest pain point of yours, which then forces you to make a reactive decision. So what we're trying to do is use this cash flow that you set up in advance so you can make the best proactive decisions, avoid mistakes, and not be put under pressure and under the gun by a certain vendor or a certain supplier, or just the pressure you put on yourself to have to make decisions that are going to require too quick and too hasty of a decision, which then hurt you. So laying out your cash flows by project, having them roll up into the business, and then managing those in a cash by cash basis daily, weekly, monthly, and so that you can see what's happening, where you need to use your cash, not only the cash in the bank, but the cash you're forecasting to come in, and how each one of those dollars is going to be spent will allow you to make a lot of proactive decisions. Here's the good news. We live in this environment every single day. I have seen the most under the gun, fired up construction contractors who come into our world. When we lay out this information for them in a very simple to use cash flow, the good news is they all know how to make the decisions. They all know what decisions to make. Like I said in the beginning of this section, very rarely, if ever, have we ever seen someone get a great set of reports, understand exactly what their cash flow is, and then just flat out make bad decisions. It's not bad decisions that are made with information. It's bad decisions that are made because of a lack of information. So here's what the best part of what I'm telling you. When you have this information, it's very easy for you to make good decisions. And in my experience, the construction contractors we work with, who span all different sizes, all different scopes of work, from a few $100,000 a year all the way up to $50+ million a year businesses. When they have the right information, they can make the right decisions, and they usually do. And finally, what's mistake number 3? That's failing to plan your cash flow accurately. So that is having projects, knowing what they're going to be, knowing the parameters of it, and then just taking your bid and the actual profitability of it and the way you laid it out on the bid sheet, what your total costs are, what the work schedule is, what you anticipate billing, and then just never mapping it out. Or you map it out, but you do it incorrectly. You put too big of variables on there. We like to call it underwriting to perfection. What does underwriting to perfection means? It means that, yeah, the cash flow works. If every single thing went exactly perfect in a perfect scenario, meaning you make the cash flow work, not estimate what actually might happen, timelines that might happen, and see what the cash flow tells you. It's not important to make a pretty spreadsheet. What's important is to put reality down and see what the spreadsheet will tell you. And that's what a cash flow analysis does. So it's failing to plan properly by usually being a little overzealous in your estimations because you want the sheet to work. You don't want to take your bid sheet, take your total cost, take your margin, and everything that looks awesome as if you were to start the project today, finish it tomorrow, invoice it the next day, and be paid 2 days later. Look, do we really need a cash flow if that's the exact scenario? No, you don't, because your bid sheet's there. You can get the materials, you execute the work, you invoice it, and you're paid 2 days later. That's a 5-day experience. You can do a lot and make great headway without ever doing cash flow in your business if that's how the revenue cycle worked. But hopefully most of you are chuckling right now and saying, yeah, that never happens. Of course not, it doesn't happen. Most of those, instead of 5 days, it's 5 weeks. Instead of 5 weeks, it's 5 months. Sometimes it's even 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, 12 months. Yes, it's gonna take a lot of work to map that cash flow out, but the longer your project is, the more critical it is. The longer your project is, the more critical it is that you turn that budget into actuals every single week as you're going through the project. It's incredible how much power you have in the knowledge when it's presented to you in the right way. You can make great decisions. You can manage your vendors. You won't miss payroll. You won't run around all week long asking your customers to pay you early. You won't be having to take certain discounts and losing your profitability or taking out loans that you don't want to take out or don't need to take out, all because of lack of planning. It's the lack of planning that can cost you a fortune. And what happens is usually it's that lack of planning gets blamed on the industry. It gets blamed on, oh, this is just too hard of an industry, or this industry cash flow stinks, or oh, if my customers just paid me too much. It's really not that. All those things are true and they do make it difficult, but the real reason you're having the pain is because you didn't plan for it properly. And that's what we're trying to avoid here. And that was mistake number 3. So we've covered the 3 big mistakes. Now let me share a story with you. In this story, you're going to hear about a construction contractor that we actually worked with. You're going to hear about the scenario they came into, which was real cash flow disaster. Money, way more money going out than money coming in. They had a lot of work, a great backlog, the capability to do even more work, too much debt, too much of the wrong structure of debt. But what we're going to talk about is how they got through that over the next 6 months. And now that we're 7 or 8 months on the other side of that, and they're flourishing and they're doing better, they're not quite yet profitable from a cash flow perspective, and they aren't even profitable yet as a business. But their daily, weekly, and monthly lives from a cash management perspective are significantly better. Now, you might say to me, how can someone be better, but yet they're not profitable? Well, when you go from really, really unprofitable to just a little unprofitable, you're doing a lot better. When you can forecast out that over the next 2 or 3 months, I'm going to become profitable 6 weeks from now, 8 weeks from now, when I finish this exact project, when I get paid 50% of that project, you start to feel a lot better. When your life is much more normal day to day, you're making your payroll on each a weekly basis. People are being paid. You made adjustments in what personnel you have. You know exactly what projects you want to use your contract labor on, which suppliers you're going to be paid from. You're paying down accounts payable at the same time. These are the reasons you're not profitable over this period of time, but it's the reasons why your life is feeling a lot better and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So we had a flooring contractor that we worked with. They came to us with a lot of cash needs and a lot of cash concerns. They had great work and they were basically in trouble because of the volume of work they were doing, the type of work they were doing. They had pretty good margins on each project. The problem is they never managed the cash flow cycle. Everything we've talked about on here. They didn't have the planning ahead of time and they didn't have the planning for the business. So what will happen to them is as the more work they did, the more of the cash constraint they had. They were too focused on paying as little as possible for the supplies, but yet the terms didn't marry up. So they were overpaying, or they were paying too early for supplies, prior to terms they could have gotten from other vendors and maybe paid a little more, which was sending a lot of cash out the door. And look, in the flooring industry, your supplier is a big chunk of the cost. The flooring itself, the wood, the laminate, the tile, whatever it may be. There's a big cost there. And then of course you had your contract labor. Now, we're all dealing with the labor industry, right? So it's not easy. So you got to pay your contract labor is not going to sign paid when paid terms. So they're paying their contract labor every 2 weeks, no problem. Well, you got to think about it. You got your supply cost, which is 30-40% of your total contract, going out the door 15, 20, 30, 45 days sometimes before you're even paid, sometimes 30, 45 days before you can even invoice for it. You got your labor being paid every 2 weeks. You can only invoice every month. Then it takes 30 more days to get paid. So you might be financing 3 payroll cycles plus your material costs, which easily over a certain period could be 60 or 70% of the cost of your actual invoice. Do that 2 months in a row, there's 70% and 70% is 140% coupled with only 100% of your cost. So you now have that 40% delta. You're spending more. Now, why are they profitable? Well, you know how it goes. You got to spend 2 months worth of expenses before you receive another month. Okay, well, that's construction. But if you're not planning for that and you keep growing, meaning you're adding a project, adding a project, adding a project, you're going to stretch that dollar number out more and more and more until you actually get to over the hump or get to that crescendo. And so how do you fuel that growth? Well, you take on bad debt. So now you couple debt service onto that. You bring in cash to fill the cash flow gap, gives you a chance to breathe. You make a couple payrolls, and then boom, debt's coming out every week. Payments are coming out every week. And now you have a bigger problem. You have all the same issues you had before because you're doing more and more work. You actually are having more and more money go out of your account because you're now paying for the debt on a weekly basis. So what do? You take on more work to bring in more money, and you keep creating the problem. So coming to us, it was a pretty bad scenario. Fortunately for them, they had already married up with a consultant. That consultant helped them reorganize some of that debt service, which really impacted their ability to run their operations. However, that new terms on the debt had to be managed, and we still had to fix the cash flow problem for the projects that got them in that place. We were able to build using our cash flow tracker, our specific project cash flow tracker that is free on our website and anyone can use. We mapped out project by project. Now this is a supplier, or this is a company that had 10 different projects and multiple suppliers. So it required doing a project-specific cash flow and then aggregating them and rolling those 10 projects up together so you could start to see the cash flow at a business level. So why is that important? Well, if you try to do things at a business level, there's just too many variables project by project. When you're paid, if you're paid, how you were paid, if it got moved 5 days here, moved up or back, 15, 20, there's too many variables. So you need to do it project by project. Get granular. Then you can start making decisions project by project. And as those project by project decisions get made, they roll up into your business positively or negatively. And now you can start running your business on a business cash flow as well. Here's the story as to why all things that we talked about can bring you to a bad outcome, but also how fixing those 3 things can immediately get you on the right track. This business is now doing very well. They're 1 month away from being not only cash flow positive, which they were 3 months ago, but now also cash flow positive and profitable. They're doing more work than they've ever done, and they actually have less debt than they've ever done. And it's purely from just managing. To wrap up, we've talked about the different issues and problems that can bring you in and out of success in cash, managing cash and cash flow overall, especially for your business and definitely by the projects. First mistake commonly made is thinking that the cash in your bank account is the cash in your business. Second mistake is failing to plan out your cash flow, not using the tools you have. The third mistake is actually failing to plan out the cash flow altogether, not even using the tools you have or making incorrect decisions off of them. We have a free cash flow tool that you can use on our website. Any good construction accountant should be able to provide you a cash flow tool for projects and your business, giving you a structure to do it. I strongly encourage you to use the tools you have available. I hope this video helped you a lot. I hope if you avoid just these 3 mistakes that we made and even use one of these tools, you're going to be on a better track and even have more control than you already have. Whether you are in the dire straits and struggling from cash, whether from growth or not, or whether you are a thriving and successful business, somehow, despite doing any of these things, implement them, and everyone, no matter where you're at, will do even better. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Share it with your friends. Please click subscribe. Give us some likes. Share it out. In the meantime, God bless you and have a great week.